July 10th, just barely getting your history fix in before the clock strikes midnight. Late baseball game tonight. Tough loss for the Cadets, but all around solid effort. So your fix for today, July 10th. July 10th. It's almost July 11th. July 10th, 1991. Boris Yeltsin is sworn in as the president of the Russian Federative Socialist Republic. Russian Federative Socialist Republic, yeah. Boris Yeltsin. You may know him or not. But by this point, right, notice I said Russian Federative Socialist Republic, so Russia was still part of the USSR. July 1991, the USSR, otherwise known as the Soviet Union, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, still existed. And it was led by Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the General Secretary of the Communist Party. Yeltsin was appointed president of the Russian Republic. Keep in mind, the USSR was made up of 15 republics, Russia just being one of those 15, the biggest, the most influential, but just one. So Yeltsin becomes president of that republic. And this is going to be significant because almost a month later, Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union, is overthrown by a group of communist leaders who felt that Gorbachev had been pushing too many liberal reforms, had been allowing for too much personal liberties for Russian people, had been allowing for too much privatization of the Russian economy, allowing individuals to run an economy instead of that state-sponsored control that the communist authorities had imposed, which, by the way, is not the way a communist system is supposed to run. A communist system is supposed to run, control of the economy is supposed to be in the hands of the people, not the government. But anyway, so August 18th, 1991, the people of Moscow awake to the news that President Gorbachev is ill. He's unable to serve as president anymore, and these hardline communists have taken over, and they want to kind of turn back the clock and make the Soviet Union not the kinder, gentler nation that President Gorbachev has attempted to implement, but go back to the draconian Communist Party-controlled state. People in Moscow aren't having it. And so when word of this leaks out, thousands of Moscow residents head to the streets. And even when the army is called in and the tanks are sent out to put down these protesters, most of the tank commanders park their tanks, climb out of them, and join the protest. And who kind of takes charge of this growing revolutionary fervor but Boris Yeltsin, who uses this opportunity to kind of utilize Russian nationalism as a way of bringing the USSR to an end. So you'll see Boris Yeltsin waving the Russian flag and giving everybody all worked up. And so within 48 hours, this attempted reclaiming of the Soviet state by these hardline communists collapses. And then Boris Yeltsin and his other counterparts, the presidents of Ukraine, of Belarus, Kazakhstan, so some of the larger Soviet socialist republics, get together and say, hey, you know what, you guys want to go our separate ways? You'll be Russia, and you'll be Kazakhstan, and you'll be Ukraine, and you'll be Belarus. And so the Soviet Union falls apart. And so eventually, President Gorbachev is released from house arrest, which he wasn't sick, he was under house arrest. But he doesn't have a job anymore. He doesn't have a country anymore. And Boris Yeltsin becomes kind of this nationalist hero. You know, the pictures of him waving the flag and climbing on the tanks. And he didn't really give many speeches because we now know that he was drunk most of the time, but, you know, waving flags and shaking his fists and grunting and, you know, that kind of stuff. People thought, this is as close to a national hero as we have had for a while. And so with the collapse of the Soviet Union, Boris Yeltsin becomes president of Russia. And things go bad. Here's one of the reasons the Soviet Union collapses is because the Soviet economy was in a free fall. And just because they got rid of the communist structure didn't suddenly mean that the economy magically resuscitated. And so Russia is going to go through a disastrous economic collapse, where basic goods will be unavailable for people. The World Bank is going to have to offer one of the largest bailouts in the billions of dollars that they had ever issued to any country just to keep Russia afloat. Meanwhile, President Yeltsin is selling off Russian assets to the highest bidder, actually mostly the lowest bidder. And so suddenly you have all of these Russian oligarchs, guys who were able to buy Russian oil refineries and Russian natural gas resources at pennies on the dollar or pennies on the ruble, whatever you want to call it, kopecks on the ruble, suddenly become vastly wealthy. Meanwhile, the Russian economy continues to collapse. Luckily, Boris Yeltsin takes some time to have some fun. This is kind of his highlight reel.
Здравствуйте.
Я сделал все, что мог.
So that's our boy Boris. The Russian economy stabilizes eventually, but Boris decides he's had it, and he's got a guy waiting in the wings who's willing to take over for him. And so in 1999, Boris Yeltsin steps down and appoints his prime minister as the new president of Russia. The idea is they'll eventually have elections to formally keep Russia a democracy, but the guy who now takes power in 1999, Vladimir Putin. And for the next 25 years, Vladimir Putin will serve as president of Russia. Vladimir Putin, as some of you know, while the Soviet Union was still in existence, served as an officer in the KGB, the infamous Soviet secret police system. And Putin will publicly state that he believed the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster in human history. And so upon taking office as president, he's going to spend the next 25 years, and he's still at it, looking to, that was a dramatic light change, because we're now going dark to represent the darkness that is Putin's Russia. But Putin has spent his political career getting reelected, amazingly, eliminating political opponents, sometimes through economic and political and criminal pressure, and sometimes just having them assassinated, and is continuing to attempt to restore the grandeur of the Soviet Union by military force, invading areas like Chechnya, the country of Georgia, the region of South Ossetia, and of course, more recently, invading the Crimea, annexing the Crimea, and invading Ukraine. This is all part of Putin's plan to restore the Soviet Union. In the meantime, he's become quite the role model for other presidents of certain countries. That's your history fix for July 10th. Got it in just under the wire. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.